Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I appreciate the Council of the Shanghai Platinum Week giving me the ability to do so. A little bit about myself. So I've been with BASF for 18 years, and I've been in the PGM industry for the last 4 years and currently have responsibility for our PGM services and recycling business globally, based here in New Jersey. I wish I could be with you in person, of course, and I'm very hopeful that at this time next year for this conference, we can do this face-to-face. Certainly excited to talk about the outlook in PGMs, and of course China is the most significant consumer of PGMs and has an impact on the overall market. So what happens in China certainly has an impact, and look forward to exchanging on my views of that, plus the overall global dynamics. From an agenda perspective, I would like to start at a high level at the macroeconomic view and then dive a little bit deeper into the PGM market as we've seen it this year, some of the challenges that we've seen, what the outlook looks like, and then look at the longer term view up to 2030. And close by talking about the recycling market as well as some of the opportunities and the announcements that BASF has made jointly with Heraeus to make investments into China. Before I do so, I do have one slide on BASF. BASF has been creating chemistry for over 150 years. Company structure, we have 6 different segments, from our chemicals, from our materials, from our industrial solutions segment to our surface technologies, nutrition and health, and our agricultural solutions technology. I've highlighted the surface technologies because surface technologies is very automotive focused. We have 2 operating divisions, the catalyst division as well as our coatings division. And our PGM services resides within the catalyst division. And BASF is one of the largest, or is the largest, chemical supplier to the automotive industry, and we have a significant number of investments right now in China across all of our operating divisions. So if we transition a little bit now to the macro view, into the 30,000 foot view, this is talking and showing about GDP globally and how GDP is developing between 2021 and 2025 time period. In the middle of this chart, you'll see Russia, and of course we all are well astute to what's happened between Russia and Ukraine with the overall conflict. You can see here the impact to the Russian economy, but more so, this has had an impact really to the global economy. If we look at the Western worlds like Europe in particular, you look at GDP forecasts which continue to drop. Now we're at 3% for 2022, 1.1% for 2023. I mean, this has to do with the sheer fact of inflation, consumer confidence. If you look at natural gas prices today, and in Europe, we moved from 30 euro per MMBTU to 300 euro per MMBTU. So this is a tenfold increase in energy costs, and of course this is hitting consumers, and this is hitting the market, impacting overall inflation. So it's a similar story also in the United States. If you look at gas prices, Henry Hub moving from $3 per MMBTU to $9 to MMBTU, so this is a 3-time increase overall on the Henry Hub. And if you look at inflation last month, inflation was at 9% as well. So sentiment, consumer confidence is much lower. You can see here GDP forecast of 1.5% this year to 1% next year in 2023. Now if we look at China, of course, 3.5% GDP expectation for 2022. A lot of this has to do with the fact of the lockdown, the shutdown, the impact on the economy that's seen in China, and you can see the rebound. But still, the rebounds aren't at the same levels that we've historically seen overall in China. Now, if you look at global GDP expectations, again, for 23, 24, 25, we're looking at percentages in the 2.3 to 2.7% range. If you looked at pre-COVID and pre-COVID crisis, GDP was at 3%. So again, the outlook is isn't as strong as what we had expected and hoped prior to COVID. Now, if we look at the PGM market, I wanted to start with looking at PGM prices because I think it tells a big part of the story around the overall market this year from January all the way through August time period. At the beginning of the year, we saw actually pretty reasonable demand. The chip crisis was easing, demand was picking up, specifically in China before China New Year. You could see PGM prices start to go up. Then in February, we had the Ukraine and the Russia crisis. The concern was, of course, over specifically on the supply side, whether Russian metal would make it to the market. And I think these concerns then help drive the prices that you see here increasing between February and March. I think we quickly learned that Russian metal would supply to the market, and then the next question came more on the demand side and the automotive demand side, and this is where the lockdowns in China in particular, you saw the lowest number of car sales in the month of April, which we'll talk about a little bit. This has an impact on the demand, and you can start to see because demand was there or was not there, that prices started to decline over the course of April all the way to today. There are some other events that occurred along the way. If you look at South Africa, if you look at the wage negotiations, these were solved for the most part as well without much impact into the market. If you look at the load shedding from Eskom in South Africa for electricity, this is also being managed, so really didn't have an impact. So we're coming from a starting point of today, the beginning of the year, to really where we're at today. So we saw rhodium prices go all the way up to $22,000 per ounce. We saw rhodium prices fall all the way to $13,500 per ounce in the month of June, and today we're sitting at $14,000 per ounce. Very similar for palladium. We saw palladium jump all the way up to over $3,000 per ounce. We saw a low in the month of June of $1,850, and today we're at roughly $2,100 per ounce as well. So if we look a little bit into the supply demand, and I wanted to talk about this because I think it's important to understand the supply situation and understand the overall impact of the automotive market. If you look at supply side for a primary supply is roughly 14 million ounces per year. If you look at the secondary supply, this contributes roughly 6 million ounces per year. So we're talking about a 20 million ounce supply market. We're talking about recycling delivering 30% of that supply as well. So this is something we need to keep an eye out, of course. And if you look at Russia in particular, Russia is 3.4 million ounces of primary supply. This equates to roughly 25%. So you can see why, when there was concerns over whether metal was flow, why prices went up in the overall marketplace. And the important point is looking on the demand side. Nearly 13 million ounces of the overall demand is coming from the automotive industry in particular. This is 65%. So as the automotive industry goes, as China goes, because China is the largest consumer of PGMs, it's the largest vehicle production market as well, the automotive market goes. So we need to keep a close eye on this, and if we do this and look at the specific the outer years of what light-duty vehicle production looks like here, you see our expectations, and you can see here our expectations compared to even 4 months ago, 5 months ago in the April timeframe. So just from 5 months ago today, we're expecting already in 2025 that light-duty vehicle production will drop by nearly 5 million units. This is driven by, of course, the economy, which I talked about already. This is driven by urbanization. This is also driven by the fact of the number of people driving cars expected in the future. So 5 million vehicles is a significant number. Even if you look at 2022 and the expectations of around 78 million vehicles being produced, expectations at the beginning of the year were mid-80s, close to mid-80s, and this has had a significant drop as well. Most importantly, though, is not only to look at light-duty vehicle production, but look at catalyzed vehicle production. Catalyzed vehicle production consists of our combustion engines. It consists of plug-in hybrids. It consists of fuel cells. And our expectations would be that the catalyzed vehicle production would peak around that 2024-2025 timeframe, around 74 million vehicles. The key thing to keep an eye out is the BEV penetration rate. In these assumptions, the baseline assumption is that BEV penetration rates between today and 2025 will be roughly 37%. Between 2025 in 2030 will be roughly 17%. And this could swing, of course, catalyzed vehicle production in either direction. So BEV curve is something that we need to pay attention to as well. I think one of the very bright spots has been overall China car sales. If you look at the last few months, in particular with the purchase tax incentives that have been put in place, we have 2.4 million vehicles that were purchased in the month of June. We have 2.4 million vehicles that were purchased in the month of July. Expectations for quarter 3, for quarter 4 this year are strong, and expectations and forecasts could show that actually in China, the number of vehicles purchased in 2022 versus 2021 could be 2% higher. So this is the really bright spot, and as I mentioned, again, as China goes, so does the automotive market goes because of the link and the usage of PGMs. Now, there's a couple factors we do need to pay attention to longer term and how these factors have an influence on the overall market. Platinum substitution is something, again, that we need to pay attention to. So a few years ago, BASF came out with the trimetallic catalyst. The trimetallic catalyst has 50% less palladium on it than a bimetallic catalyst. And the penetration rate and the acceptance in the market, when you think about a commodity that is in palladium $2,000 an ounce and in platinum is roughly $1,000 an ounce, so double the price, there is significant cost savings. And the acceptance in the market from OEMs has been extremely high. And we see that acceptance also very high in China. So our expectations would be in 2022 that roughly 700,000 ounces of platinum would be substituted for palladium, and then that would go up to 2 million ounces per year in the years 26, 27, also in 2025. So this is a trend that we need to keep an eye on because it has an impact on overall deficits and surpluses as it relates to platinum, as it also relates to palladium. So expectations would be that platinum prices likely will go up and increase. The other trend to keep an eye out is the recycling business and the recycling industry. I mentioned already that secondary supply is delivering 30% of the overall PGMs on the supply side. If you look at the shorter term this year, we've seen roughly a 15 to 20% decline in volumes on recycling. This is very intuitive. Why? If you look at the fact of the matter is long lead times for cars, used car prices are at record prices. People are just driving their vehicles longer. If you also look at the fact that in 2021 we had a rhodium price of $30,000 per ounce, so anyone that had any kind of scrap catalytic converters in their supply chain was sending them in to be refined to capitalize on the very, very high rhodium prices. So supply chains are also significantly reduced. So this year alone, our expectation is that the impact of 15 to 20% less scrap volume would equate to roughly 500,000 ounces on the secondary supply. And if you look at the breakdown, roughly 60% of this would be palladium, roughly 30% of this would be platinum, and roughly 10% of this would be rhodium. Despite that, though, significant investments are occurring in the recycling industry, including by BASF. I would characterize utilization rates to be relatively high. We've recently announced expansions in our refinery in the United States. We've also recently purchased new assets as well in the United States. And if you look at the recycling market longer term, expectations are the longer term market will move from 30% of primary supply all the way to 40% of primary supply. And that's really driven from China. And China has the single highest growth rate country for recycling out of all countries. And to participate in China, you need to have local assets in China, as the metal needs to stay in China. And this is exactly what our intentions as BASF are, as we actually announced in February this year a joint venture with Heraeus to do exactly that, to cover PGMs for the PGM automotive catalyst market. in particular. So we announced this in February. We've already broke ground in September. Our expectations would be that we would have our operation running in December or late 2023. We're really bringing state-of-the-art technologies. So if you look at the expertise of BASF in understanding the automotive catalyst market from a technology perspective, our expertise in pyrometallurgical technology. If you look at Heraeus's expertise, of course, in hydrometallurgical technology with the refinery that already exists in Nanjing. We put these things two together, and we expect to really have state-of-the-art technology and are able to offer our customers in China, also recycled metal, which has a greener, lower CO2 footprint. So super excited about this. I mentioned its location is in Pinghu, so just southwest of Shanghai. And again, our expectations would be that this would be operational close to the end of 2023. So if we put all this together and we put all the substitution effect with the recycling effect, our expectations are as follows for platinum, palladium, and rhodium as relates to surpluses and deficits. The story with platinum, again, is the substitution effect. I think our expectations would be that platinum will move from surplus into deficit by 2024 and will remain in an overall deficit over the duration of this decade to 2030. One industry to keep an eye out on for platinum in particular is the hydrogen economy. If you look at the energy transformation that's occurring in Europe, the need for hydrogen production, if you look at hydrogen production, this is done by electrolyzers. Electrolyzers contain platinum. This is one trend to keep an eye on. If you look at the fuel cell market in the automotive industry and the expectations that heavy-duty vehicles could move to fuel cells, again, fuel cell technology also having platinum. So the overall hydrogen economy, I think, is the midterm won't have so much impact on platinum, but in the longer term, post-2030, will also have an impact, and it's something that we should all keep an eye on. If you look at palladium, it's quite the opposite story. Again, the substitution effect, so we see the opposite, moving from a deficit to a surplus already in 2023, potentially in 2024 as well. And I would call to the attention, of course, if you look at what our expectations are by 2030, we could have a surplus of 3.5 million ounces. That's pretty significant. That will have, of course, an impact on the overall price and the direction the price of palladium moves. But as an industry, we also need to think about other alternatives for palladium, and this is something that's been part of conversation as well, because we will have additional surpluses of palladium. Rhodium is fairly balanced. I mean, right now we're in deficit, expect to be in deficit for the next 3-4 years. That could transition out to a surplus. I think the trend to keep an eye out for rhodium, of course, if we come back to China, is if you look at 6B regulations with real-world driving conditions, this could have an impact on higher loadings for rhodium, and expectations could be that deficit continues and extends across the decade. I think holistically, the one wild card that I've already mentioned is the BEV penetration rate, and the BEV penetration rate is something that we need to keep an eye on. I believe personally that if you look at the ability to execute on capital requirements to deliver on OEMs' expectations, on government's expectations, if you look at the amount of raw materials that are available for base metals, this is all challenging, and challenging in the context, I think, challenging to be able to deliver in such a short time period. So I think that there's more of a risk that the BEV penetration curve will shift out longer than being quicker. And of course, if that shifts out, then this will have an impact on the PGM market, and in a positive fashion, in a positive way. So with that, it concludes my presentation. I want to thank again the Council for the opportunity to speak here today. I appreciate it. BASF is absolutely committed to China. We're committed to the PGM industry. We're excited about the future as well, especially with our new investments coming on. Look forward to continue the collaboration, to start new collaborations, and I wish all of you a fantastic rest of Platinum Week. Thank you very much.